Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So in today's video we are going to be talking about crit me with your best shot meta. It is a meta that the community itself voted for. We have had a couple of times in the past and we're going to have it again. Now, not everybody was playing back then. There are some new champions, plus somebody might just need a refresher. So I'm going to break down the nodes, the implications of it, try and explain the meta the best I can, because there are a lot of misconceptions surrounding it, and then go over some of the MVPs as well. So first things first, crit me with your best shot meta always comes coupled with critical interruption, where the defender takes 100% less damage from all sources except for critical hits. Now, this can also include critical hits in the block. Guaranteed champion has to have that guaranteed critical interruption passive or a generic ability to crit through block in itself. That means no red numbers, no brown numbers, no burst of damage, no nothing. It's just big yellow numbers or white numbers who are crits in the block. And the first big misconception is that this is a nuke meta, or this meta is focused on having, OG Storms and Sunspots and champions like that can, nuke opponent quickly with massive special attacks or very, very many fury effects or something. It's not. It's largely defensive meta. It's all about having the matchups that opponent can't really do well. And the reason for it is because almost any champion turns into an attacker. When people hear crit me with your best shot meta, they immediately think, I'm going to use Ghost, I'm going to use Mole Man, I'm going to use Hitmonkey or Stealthy or something like that. And you can use all of those champions, but what you need to keep in mind is that, for instance, Ghost will perform no better than she normally would. Whereas a lot of champions perform significantly better than they normally do. For instance, like Kingpin. Kingpin has massive fury buffs, and the fact that you give him guaranteed critical hits turns him into an absolute machine of destruction. And as an offset of that, in a meta like this, you can take a Mephisto and finish a fight with him. You can take an Atuma, or you can take whoever, and they will have, at the very least, solid amount of damage in them. So, what is the key to this meta then? It is defense. And I'm going to show the MVPs, and then I'm going to show you guys my deck as well as go over through some match history to kind of like show how it looks like exactly. So first we're going to go over some newer champions maybe. For instance, Spider-Punk. Spider-Punk is actually a very sneakily powerful defender in this meta, because whenever he would be intercepted, he evades and passively stuns the opponent, which means that the guaranteed crits are unavailable to vast majority of the champions, and he's a very big problem to deal with, where you have to have an evade counter. You need to be able to land your intercept with a relic if you don't have an evade counter, or you have to have an organically high crit rate with something like Stealth with Spider-Man, even though he also has an evade counter in him, or something like Adam Warlock, where you don't have to intercept him, but you can crit a lot. Otherwise, he's a massive problem. Then Korg is just generically a good staller. Symbiote, Superior Iron Man is actually going to be a very, very good nuke as well. With his all increased attack rating, he should be able to do a ton of matchups very efficiently. Then we have Titania. Now, Titania and a handful of other champions will be included in here specifically for Man-Thing, because Man-Thing is one of the biggest defensive nightmares in this meta, because Man-Thing is not only a Mystic champion that can put poisons on you, interacts crazy with Mystic Dispersion, but also takes no additional damage from critical hits, which means you can crit against Man-Thing, it's just you're going to be doing very, very little damage. And vast majority of the champions time out against Man-Thing in this meta. So Titania is one of the more solid options against Man-Thing, and I think probably the best option is Hulk. With Hulk, you still want to stay on top of the fight, keep an eye on MD. He's obviously poison immune, and Iron Breaks will be willpower healing you, but the key is to go for your level 3. The level 3 is super important in this matchup. Then we have She-Hulk, another solid Man-Thing counter, which is the primary reason why he is here. When we have Atuma, it's just a generically solid champion to have here, because they will guarantee do pretty much some damage back to your opponent. but the star of the skill class for the most part is Kingpin. You fire up that level 2, not only you have massive attack rating increase, you also have that unstoppable, which effectively allows you to get guaranteed safe intercepts. And therefore unstoppable is also kind of like a crutch in this meta in general, where you are unstoppable, you just hold your block, wait for opponent to dash in at you, and punish that, and you have a guaranteed safe intercept, and in case of Kingpin, also a creep ton of damage. Massacre is one of the most brutal attackers in this meta that can do a ton of matchups he otherwise wouldn't. And the key is just build up your level 2 intercept before you drop that level 2 in the block, have your bat ignited, and then just about everything will die. It's also one of the most solid Man-Thing counters in my opinion. Onslaught's here because his offensive power has been significantly diminished, even though he still can finish out fights, just like I mentioned with vast majority of the other champions, but he's not the greatest attacker. The value of Onslaught comes from his ability to inflict those pesky neuroshocks, and when opponents crit, which they have to, you have significantly higher chance to inflict neuroshock. Either champion's attacks have 15% chance to inflict a neuroshock passive, dealing 3000 damage over 12 seconds. Critical hits and unblockable special attacks have their chance increased by 40%, which means every second hit you're going to get neuroshock placed on you, and you will end up taking some damage from that. Not to mention Onslaught has a very annoying AI. Obviously we have Mr. Sinister. Mr. Sinister here is from his regeneration. 100% chance to regenerate 70% of the damage dealt by the enemy critical hits over half second, and that's crazy. He's a very, very, very nasty defender. You kind of have to have like a Warlock or a Red Skull or some other way of heal block, because now after buff, he also doesn't really get affected by Despair Mastery, and obviously he can throw dots back at you, and yeah, there aren't many great options for him. CGR is still one of the best options. Massacre actually can absolutely nuke him down as well, but that's just a handful. Havoc is in general pretty much the MVP of this meta, because unless you have an armor up, you're pretty much dead. Because for Havoc, not only he has massive critical damage reduction, Havoc reduces opponent's critical damage rating by 50%. Also, whenever you do attack Havoc, and if you do crit against him, you get a plasma charge placed on you. And unless you have an armor up, you're just gonna explode, basically. So only champions with armor up or Havoc itself can be a counter to him. And this is one of the key things that I want to remind everybody, that Havoc does not take detonation damage from other Havocs. So often it works out where you place a Havoc and then opponent counters it with their Havoc. Keep that in mind, it can happen. Other than that, you kind of have to have that armor up in order to be able to deal with him. Sunspot is just ridiculous levels of nuke for this meta. Northstar has a very, very powerful ability. You do want to have him at very high sig though, because or at the very least awaken, because after his special attacks, opponents can't crit against him. So there is a chance that he could turn out to be one of the more pesky defenders as well. Now, I haven't ranked him up quite yet. I do want to see how well or poorly he does in general, but there is a chance that Northstar might be a very annoying champion to deal with. I'm gonna go further to Adam Warlock, and the reason for Adam Warlock being on this list again is quite straightforward. He's one of those champions with massive attack increase, as well as super high chance to crit, thanks to his massive precision. So it means that you do not necessarily need to intercept the opponent, and also means that he's one of those very few champions that, again, crits a lot without them counting as guaranteed crits. And that can be extremely advantageous in matchups where you can't really land in those intercepts, like against Spider-Punk, for example. You know, CGR, crit for days, and tons of damage. Of course, he's going to work. Nova is one of the hidden MVPs of the meta as well, because he can be very potent offensively with his Fury buffs and massive attack increase and his intercept reliant playstyle to begin with. And then on top of it, he's also a crazy good defender, because whenever Nova is struck with True Strike, unblockable or guaranteed critical hits, opponents suffer minus 70% attack rating. and he just charges up faster as well. So No is quite nasty in this meta. Then we have Serpent, because Serpent does always Serpent things. Now in this meta there are a few more counters Serpent than normal, but he can still be a massive pain. Then we have Maestro, one of the most dangerous defenders, because with Maestro, as soon as he gets his glancing up, he becomes very, very hard to take down well, because he does have that glancing buff, and that later turns into passive, which basically means that opponents can't crit against him with basic attacks, and that means that there are a ton of champions who will be significantly slowed down, and the fight is going to turn up into a living nightmare. So the critical interaction with glancing is a very big pain in the bum, and yeah, Maestro is a very dangerous defender in this meta. Now again, further on we have the Destroyer, and Destroyer is also quite a unique cookie, because in case of Destroyer, he goes unstoppable when he's dashing in at you, and you're gonna end up getting smacked in the face. And there aren't many champions that can bypass this safely, because he's also slow immune, and yeah, he can be a bit of a problem here. So keep an eye out for the Destroyer on defense. Then we have White Tiger, again listed here as one of those champions with very high crit chance. That does not necessarily rely on you actually landing the intercepts. You can just dash in after a special attack, for instance. You can get that massive precision, and you're going to be critting a ton. And her Fury buffs also give her a nice amount of chunky damage, and obviously just aggressive playstyle in general. Scarlet Witch is one of the deadliest, most insane champions in this meta, because with guaranteed crits, Scarlet Witch turns into a ridiculous champion that just spams debuffs, power drains opponent, and goes for massive special attacks. So yeah, Scarlet Witch is insane, but keep in mind that you have to have her at a very high sig. Juggernaut, one of the fastest nukes in this meta, with very easy, safe, guaranteed intercept option. Then we have Chavez, still amazing, tons of damage, and also one of the best Serpent counters, and something that you definitely need to keep an eye out for. Chavez still very good. Mephisto is actually also crazy good for this meta, and the reason for that is because there just doesn't seem to be too many Incinerate immune champions running around in this meta, and on top of that, because of his power gain, he's often very risky to intercept, because of all the power, again, in aura and power gain that he's getting. He will most of the time have a special attack ready, and yeah, he's a problem in this meta. So keep that in mind. If you have yours ranked, definitely recommend adding him to the deck. Man-Thing is arguably the dominant defender of this meta. There are only a handful of champions who are capable of doing this fight well, and even then it probably will take like at least a minute most of the time. And that all comes from his Made of Mush passive, because Man-Thing's made of Swamp Mush and lacks any meaningful weak points to exploit. This makes it immune to armor break or stagger effects, and prevents critical hits from dealing bonus damage. And yeah, he's a one big chunky bastard in this meta. Ebony Maw, it's not a champion that I'm personally currently running. I might change my mind on that, depending how many science champions are present in the top decks, but keep in mind that Ebony Maw will falter all the guaranteed critical hits thrown at him, except against science champions, which means you can effectively catch an opponent into an unwinnable situation if they do not have science champion when you draft Ebony Maw, but that's fairly conditional. That's kind of similar how back in the day, when people were still running recall masteries, people used Elsa, where Elsa is useless on defense if opponents have a mutant, but if they don't, it's basically an auto win for you. Similar situation with Ebony Maw. Place Ebony Maw on the defense. There are a handful of champions who can do that fight with ability to bypass miss, for instance Bullseye, handful of others, but in general, if they do not have science champion, they will have a fairly bad time in this fight. Then again, it's up to you whether you choose to run it. Warlock is one of the MVPs of this meta as well, because whilst he has his armor up buff active, he will switch off critical hits on opponent's special attacks, even though if they are guaranteed, they will still not be able to crit. And then the infection can mess with opponents as always. And he's also a machine offensively in this meta because of his very high crit damage rating. And those arm breaks in level 2, he's very fast damage wise too, so he does tremendously well in the meta. You know, Red Skull, you'd think Red Skull doesn't really do well because special attack shocks are not a thing anymore, but people do kind of forget that Red Skull gains additional attack per armor buff, and with guaranteed crits, well, he finishes out fights faster than he did otherwise. And as a defender, whilst him not having the ability to switch off opponents' crits like he does in general metas, he's still very capable defender as well at times where if you do miss an intercept, you're going to get punished quite hard. That unstoppable buff can make things hard as well, or the auto block after special attacks. And as I mentioned, Ghost performs as normal, so there's no special treatment for that. That said, obviously there will be more champions that work well that I didn't go over, that I didn't kind of feel the need to. For instance, Bullseye still going to be a great defender, of course. Photon is weaker defender than normal, but better on attack. And in general, just about any champion is viable on attack in this meta. It's more about finding these weird interactions or very tough defenders for opponents to fight, so they get stalled or they get, you know, damage throughout the fight. Speaking of damage throughout the fight, I'm sure that quite a few people will be running Ascended Electros as well, because there are very, you know, few champions who can do this fight without taking any damage back from Electro. So he will be present in the metas. But final bit, I'm going to show you guys my deck at the moment as I am running it, and I'm going to kind of comment on the absolute MVP. So far, Spider-Punk has been crazy good, so has Man-Thing and Killmonger. I'm possibly considering taking out of the deck. The Destroyer has been great. Jugs and Massacre have been amazing. Hulk is very solid too, mainly as Man-Thing counter. Havoc and Mr. Sinister are absolute MVP stars. I'm running rank 3 Omega Sentinel because there aren't too many domino counters, and Omega Sentinel actually has like a massive base attack rating, so even though you cannot do the incinerate damage, you can still finish out fights quite quickly. Then I have Warlock and Mephisto still holding very, very strong. Onslaught is crazy good too, and obviously we have Serpent. Bishop is kind of like a very solid nuke, but in general he hasn't done that well. And yeah, I will be making some adjustments to my deck throughout the season, of course, but if you guys want to see exactly what I'm running right now, then there you go. This is it. Hopefully this video was useful to you guys. If it was, well then hit all the good buttons, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all